I wanted to talk about reparations in regards to Black Americans for a few minutes. Sometimes while I'm working, I listen to these quote unquote Black talk radio stations. I listen to WVON out of Chicago, WCHB out of Detroit, WOLB out of Baltimore. And without fail, if I listen to those stations for one of those stations for more than 3 hours, there will be a caller call up and say, Black people need to get reparations. We all need to get reparations. The Jews got reparations. The Japanese got reparations. And this quote unquote, they owe us because we were slaves. Even though none of us were slaves, they always say we. And not all of our ancestors were slaves. And in fact, some of our ancestors here, black ancestors here in the United States, owned slaves up until the end of the Civil War. But there's a show which airs on PBS, your public broadcasting system. The title of the show is Finding Your Roots. And they have celebrities as guests on the show, and they trace their family tree back as far as they can. This past Tuesday, Sean Combs, P. Diddy, and LL Cool J, they were guests on the show. Concerning Sean Combs, they were able to trace his paternal side of his family back to 1811. And they discovered that all of his relatives on his paternal side, they were free people dating back to at least 1811. And they also stated that in 1850, there were 75,000 free black people living in Maryland. Concerning LL Cool J, they tracked his maternal side of the family back to the early 1700s. And all of his family on that side, they lived in Ohio, which was a free state, which means none of his maternal relatives were ever slaves. So how do they get reparations? Because they were never slaves, obviously. Not you can't just say, oh, well, they were black. Like, no, you were never slaves. So how can you get reparations? Or in that fact, how can you suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome because none of your families were slaves dating back to the 1700s? But that inspired me to do a little research on my own family. Prior to yesterday, I was only able to track my paternal side of the family back to my great great grandfather, who was born in 1885. And see, my family comes from a border state, and there were four border states during the Civil War. And I think I was able to find my third great grandfather. I was able to track him down through some military records. You know, a black guy. He served in the 56th Infantry. And but see, we had traditional names in my family, and my paternal side of the family comes from a small town. And looking through the military records, the names and everything matches up, the dates match up. So I think he might be my third great grandfather, even though he was a slave prior to the war. The slave owner signed the paperwork over for him to go fight with the Union Army, and obviously after the Union Army won, he was a free man, and he settled into this small town where my father's side of the family comes from. So, and concerning reparations, then you have the people that say, well, what about Jim Crow? All right. I spoke to a lady who had married into our family. I spoke to her yesterday. She was born in 1942, and her family lived in Greenville, Mississippi. Come to find out that her father owned land and had employees working for him in the 1930s and 1940s as a black man in Greenville, Mississippi. So, we've always had black people who had the intestinal fortitude to overcome whatever situation that they were born into and then just take it from there. And which reminds me of the Floria Guy story. Floria Guy is a track runner. She's a black French woman. And if anybody knows anything about track, the most important thing, especially if you're running a relay race, you don't concentrate on where you began. You don't concentrate on if I'm behind. What you concentrate is running your leg of the race and doing the best you can. And I'm going to leave a link to a video of her, of a great race that she ran. And I'm also going to leave a link to the show, Finding Your Roots, in the description box. Talk to you later. Bye.